I never thought I'd find myself in this position, married with a beautiful daughter and another child on the way. Growing up in a small town, I had always dreamed of a better life, one where I could make a difference and provide for my family in ways my parents never could. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. My husband Ethan and I had been happily married for 5 years. He was a successful software engineer, and I was a dedicated nurse. Our daughter, Lily, was the light of our lives. She had just turned 4 and was the spitting image of her father, with his warm brown eyes and infectious smile. Everything seemed perfect until the day we received the devastating news that Ethan's father had passed away suddenly. He had been a kind and supportive figure in my life, always treating me like a daughter. His loss left a gaping hole in our family, as we struggled to come to terms with our grief. Ethan's mother, Mona, suggested moving in with us to help with the household and my second pregnancy. At first I was hesitant. Mona and I had never seen eye to eye, but Ethan convinced me that having her around would be beneficial, especially with his frequent work trips. Little did I know that her presence would turn my life upside down. From the moment she moved in, Mona made it clear that she was in charge. She criticized my every move, from the way I cooked to how I raised Lily. "You're too soft on her," she would say, her voice dripping with condescension. "She needs discipline, or she'll end up just like you." I tried my best to brush off her comments, focusing on my work and taking care of Lily. But as my pregnancy progressed, I found myself increasingly exhausted and overwhelmed. Ethan was rarely home, and when he was too preoccupied with work to notice the tension between his mother and me. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift at the hospital, I found Mona rearranging the nursery I had spent weeks preparing. "This won't do," she declared, holding up the soft yellow blanket I had lovingly chosen. "The baby needs something more practical, not these frivolous things." I felt my anger rising, but I swallowed my words, not wanting to cause a scene. Instead, I retreated to my room, fighting back tears of frustration and helplessness. As the weeks wore on, Mona's behavior became increasingly intolerable. She would disappear for hours, leaving me to handle all the housework and childcare, only to return with a list of complaints about how I was failing as a wife and mother. I knew I needed to talk to Ethan, to make him understand how much his mother's presence was affecting me. But every time I tried, he would dismiss my concerns, saying that I was overreacting and that his mother meant well. I felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of Mona's constant criticism and Ethan's inability to see the truth. I longed for an escape, for someone to understand what I was going through. Little did I know that my breaking point was just around the corner, and it would come in the form of a life-threatening illness that would test the limits of my strength and the bonds of my family. As Mona settled into our home, I quickly realized that her offer to help was nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to control every aspect of our lives. She took over the kitchen, insisting on cooking meals that catered to her tastes, disregarding the fact that I was struggling with morning sickness and food aversions. "Jade, you need to eat more," she would chide, pushing a plate of greasy bacon and eggs towards me. "You're eating for 2 now, and my grandchild needs proper nourishment." I would force myself to take a few bites, fighting the urge to gag, knowing that any protest would only lead to a lecture about my inadequacies as a mother. Mona's presence also put a strain on my relationship with Ethan. She would monopolize his time, insisting on long conversations about his work and his plans for the future, leaving little room for me to connect with my husband. One evening, as I was putting Lily to bed, I overheard Mona talking to Ethan in the living room. "You know, Ethan, you really should consider taking that promotion in New York. It's a fantastic opportunity, and you can't let Jade hold you back." I felt my heart sink as I listened to Ethan's response. "I know, Mom, but it's not that simple. Jade's job is here, and with the baby coming, I don't think it's the right time." "Nonsense," Mona scoffed. "Jade can find work anywhere, and I'll be here to help with the children. You need to think about your career, Ethan. Don't let her selfish desires ruin your chances of success." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could Mona be so dismissive of my needs and desires? And why wasn't Ethan standing up for me? As the days turned into weeks, I found myself growing more and more resentful of Mona's presence in our home. She would criticize the way I dressed, the way I spoke, even the way I breathed. Nothing I did was ever good enough for her. "Really, Jade, you should take better care of yourself," she would say, eyeing my swollen ankles and exhausted face. "No wonder Ethan is always working late. Who would want to come home to this?" Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see how much she was getting to me. I threw myself into my work, taking on extra shifts at the hospital, desperate for a reprieve from the constant criticism and belittlement. But even at work, I couldn't escape Mona's influence. She would call me constantly, demanding updates on my whereabouts and when I would be home. If I didn't answer right away, she would leave scathing voicemails, accusing me of neglecting my family. I knew I needed help, but I didn't know where to turn. My friends were all busy with their own lives, and I didn't want to burden them with my problems. I felt utterly alone, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. One afternoon, as I was leaving the hospital after a particularly grueling shift, I ran into my neighbor, Zoe. She took one look at my tear-stained face and pulled me into a tight hug. "Oh, honey, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I broke down, pouring out all the frustrations and pain I had been holding in for so long. Zoe listened patiently, offering words of comfort and support. "You can't let her treat you like this, Jade," she said firmly. "You need to stand up for yourself, for your family. Ethan needs to know what's going on, and you need to set some boundaries with Mona." I knew Zoe was right, but the thought of confronting Mona filled me with dread. She had already proven herself to be a master manipulator, and I feared that any attempt to stand up to her would only make things worse. Little did I know that my fears were about to become a reality, and that the price of my silence would be higher than I ever could have imagined. Zoe's words echoed in my mind as I drove home from the hospital, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I knew I needed to talk to Ethan, to make him understand the hell I had been living in since Mona moved in, but the thought of facing his mother's wrath made my stomach churn. As I pulled into the driveway, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that was sure to come. I walked into the house, expecting to find Mona waiting for me with her usual barrage of insults and criticisms, but instead, I was greeted by an eerie silence. I made my way to the living room, where I found Ethan sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. He looked up as I entered, his eyes red and puffy from crying. "Ethan, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. "It's Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "She's gone." For a moment I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Mona had finally realized the error of her ways and decided to leave on her own. But as I looked closer at Ethan's face, I realized that something was terribly wrong. "What do you mean she's gone?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "She left a note," Ethan said, handing me a piece of paper. "She said she can't stand to be around us anymore, that we're ungrateful and selfish, and that she's going to stay with her friends until we come to our senses." I read the note, my eyes widening with each word. Mona had painted herself as the victim, claiming that I had driven her away with my constant demands and lack of appreciation for all she had done for us. "This is ridiculous," I said, crumpling the note in my fist. "She's the one who's been making our lives miserable, not the other way around." Ethan looked at me, his eyes filled with confusion and hurt. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Jade. Mom has always been there for me, and now she's saying all these terrible things about you. I just don't know what to do." I felt my anger rising, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Ethan, you have to trust me. Your mother has been manipulating you, manipulating all of us. She's not the victim here. We are." But even as I spoke the words, I could see the doubt in Ethan's eyes. Mona had always been his rock, his constant support, and the thought of her being anything less than perfect was almost too much for him to bear. Over the next few days, I tried my best to carry on as normal, but the weight of Mona's absence hung heavy in the air. Ethan was distant, spending long hours at work and barely speaking to me when he was home. Lily, too, seemed to sense that something was wrong, clinging to me more than usual and asking constantly when Grandma would be coming back. I knew I needed to do something, to find a way to make Ethan see the truth about his mother, but I was at a loss. Every time I tried to bring up the subject, he would shut down, retreating into himself and leaving me feeling more alone than ever. It was during one of these moments of despair that I finally broke down, collapsing onto the bed in a fit of tears. I felt like I was drowning, suffocating under the weight of Mona's manipulation and Ethan's inability to see the truth. As I lay there, my body racked with sobs, I heard a soft knock on the door. I looked up to see Zoe standing there, her face filled with concern. "Oh, Jade," she said, rushing to my side and pulling me into a hug. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea things had gotten this bad." I clung to her, pouring out all the pain and frustration I had been holding in for so long. Zoe listened patiently, offering words of comfort and support. "You can't let her win, Jade," she said firmly. "You have to keep fighting, for yourself and for your family. Ethan will come around eventually, but you have to be strong until then." I knew Zoe was right, but I also knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. Mona had already proven herself to be a formidable opponent, and I feared that the price of standing up to her would be higher than I ever could have imagined. As the weeks passed, I threw myself into my work, taking on extra shifts at the hospital in a desperate attempt to escape the suffocating atmosphere at home. Ethan was rarely around, his business trips becoming more frequent and longer in duration. I knew he was using work as an excuse to avoid dealing with the tension between his mother and me, but I couldn't bring myself to confront him about it. One evening, as I was preparing dinner for Lily and myself, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I tried to ignore it, attributing it to the stress and exhaustion of the past few months, but as the night wore on, the pain only intensified. By the time I put Lily to bed, I was struggling to breathe, my vision blurring at the edges. I knew I needed help, but Ethan was out of town, and I couldn't bear the thought of calling Mona. In a moment of desperation, I reached for my phone and dialed Zoe's number. "Jade, what's wrong?" she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Zoe, I need help," I gasped, my words coming out in short, painful bursts. "I think there's something wrong with the baby." Zoe was at my door in minutes, her face pale with worry. She took one look at me and immediately called for an ambulance. As we waited for the paramedics to arrive, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I knew that my condition was serious, and I feared for the life of my unborn child. When the ambulance finally arrived, I was barely conscious, my body racked with pain and fever. The paramedics worked quickly, loading me onto a stretcher and rushing me to the hospital. As I lay in the emergency room, hooked up to a myriad of machines and monitors, I overheard the doctors discussing my condition. "Pneumonia," they said, their voices grave. "And she's 7 months pregnant. We need to act fast." I felt a surge of panic wash over me. Pneumonia was serious enough on its own, but coupled with my pregnancy, it could be deadly. As the doctors worked to stabilize my condition, I drifted in and out of consciousness, my mind filled with thoughts of Lily and my unborn child. I knew I needed to fight, to be strong for them, but I could feel my body weakening with each passing minute. It was during one of these moments of lucidity that I remembered Mona. Despite everything she had put me through, I knew that she needed to be informed of my condition. I asked Zoe to contact her, hoping that she would put aside her animosity and be there for her son and grandchildren. But as the hours passed and Mona failed to appear, I began to realize the depths of her cruelty. Even in my darkest hour, she couldn't be bothered to show an ounce of compassion or concern. Ethan, on the other hand, rushed to my side as soon as he received word of my condition. He sat by my bedside, holding my hand and whispering words of encouragement, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Jade," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have been here for you, for our family. I promise things will be different from now on." I wanted to believe him, to take comfort in his words, but I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. Mona's influence had taken root, and it would take more than a few apologies to undo the damage she had caused. As I lay there, fighting for my life and the life of my unborn child, I couldn't help but wonder how things had gotten so bad. How had I allowed myself to become so isolated, so alone in my struggles? And how could I ever hope to rebuild my family in the face of such overwhelming adversity? But even in my darkest moments, I knew that I had to keep fighting, for Lily, for my unborn child, and for the life I knew we deserved. No matter what it took, I would find a way to break free from Mona's grip and reclaim the happiness that had been stolen from us. As I fought for my life in the hospital, Zoe remained by my side, a constant source of support and comfort. She sat with me for hours, holding my hand and wiping the sweat from my brow, her eyes filled with concern and compassion. "You're going to get through this, Jade," she said, her voice firm with conviction. "You're one of the strongest people I know, and you have so much to live for." I wanted to believe her, to take strength from her words, but the pain and exhaustion were overwhelming. I could feel my body weakening with each passing hour, and I feared that I might not have the strength to keep fighting. It was during one of these moments of despair that Ethan finally returned to the hospital, his face drawn and haggard. He had been away on business when I first fell ill, and it had taken him nearly 2 days to make it back to the city. "Jade, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking as he took my hand in his. "I should have been here sooner. I never should have left you alone with my mother." I could see the guilt and regret in his eyes, and I knew that he was finally beginning to understand the toll that Mona's behavior had taken on our family. "It's not your fault, Ethan," I said, my voice weak and raspy. "You couldn't have known how bad things would get." But even as I spoke the words, I knew that they weren't entirely true. Ethan had seen the way his mother treated me, had heard the cruel words she spoke and the manipulative games she played. He had chosen to ignore it, to bury his head in the sand and hope that things would get better on their own. And now, as I lay in the hospital bed, fighting for my life and the life of our unborn child, the consequences of that choice had become all too clear. Over the next few days, my condition began to improve, thanks in no small part to the tireless efforts of the hospital staff. They worked around the clock to monitor my vital signs and adjust my medications, doing everything in their power to ensure that both the baby and I remained stable. Ethan rarely left my side during this time. His attention focused solely on my well-being and the well-being of our child. He slept in a chair by my bed, holding my hand and whispering words of love and encouragement, his eyes filled with a newfound determination. "I promise, Jade, things will be different from now on," he said, his voice firm with resolve. "I won't let my mother hurt you or our family ever again." I wanted to believe him, to take comfort in his words, but a part of me couldn't help but wonder if it was too little, too late. Mona's influence had taken root, and it would take more than a few promises to undo the damage she had caused. As the days turned into weeks, I slowly began to regain my strength, my body healing from the ravages of the pneumonia. The baby, too, seemed to be thriving, growing stronger with each passing day. But even as my physical health improved, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. Mona's absence weighed heavily on my mind, and I couldn't help but wonder what she was planning, what new scheme she might be hatching to tear our family apart. It was during one of these moments of anxiety that Zoe came to visit, her face filled with a mixture of concern and determination. "Jade, there's something you need to know," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I overheard Mona talking to one of her friends on the phone. She's planning to leave for a luxury cruise tomorrow, and she doesn't intend to come back until after the baby is born." I felt a surge of anger wash over me, hot and fierce. How could Mona be so selfish, so cruel? How could she abandon her own grandchild in their hour of need? But even as the anger burned within me, I knew that I couldn't let it consume me. I had to stay focused on my own recovery, on the health and well-being of my unborn child. And so, with a heavy heart and a newfound sense of determination, I began to plan for the future, a future without Mona and her toxic influence. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I also knew that I had the strength and the support to see it through. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I would fight for my family, for the life we deserved. And I would do it with the love and support of those who truly cared for me, those who would stand by my side through thick and thin. Mona lounged on the deck of the luxury cruise ship, sipping a cocktail and basking in the warm sun. She had been looking forward to this trip for months, a chance to escape the drama and responsibilities of family life and indulge in some much-needed relaxation. As she lay there, her mind drifted to thoughts of Jade and the baby. She knew that her daughter-in-law was still in the hospital, fighting for her life, but she couldn't bring herself to feel any real concern. In her mind, Jade had brought this on herself, with her constant demands and selfish behavior. Suddenly, Mona's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She glanced at the screen, expecting to see a text from one of her friends, but instead, she saw a voicemail from Lily. Curious, she pressed play and held the phone to her ear. At first, she couldn't make out what her granddaughter was saying, her voice muffled and distant. But as she listened more closely, she felt a chill run down her spine. "Grandma, please come home," Lily pleaded, her voice thick with tears. "Mommy is really sick, and the doctors say she might not make it. We need you here, Grandma. Please come back." Mona felt a surge of panic wash over her. She had never heard Lily sound so frightened, so desperate, and the thought of Jade actually dying, of leaving her grandchildren without a mother, was almost too much to bear. Without a second thought, Mona grabbed her bags and rushed off the ship, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew that she needed to get to the hospital as quickly as possible, to be there for her son and grandchildren in their hour of need. As she raced through the airport, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Mona couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over her. She had always known that her behavior towards Jade was wrong, that her constant criticism and manipulation were taking a toll on their family. But she had never imagined that it would come to this, that her own selfishness could put the life of her unborn grandchild at risk. When she finally arrived at the hospital, Mona was met with a sight that made her blood run cold. Ethan was standing outside Jade's room, his face twisted with rage and disgust. "How dare you show your face here?" he spat, his voice shaking with anger. "After everything you've done, after all the pain you've caused, you have the nerve to come crawling back now?" Mona opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She could see the hurt and betrayal in her son's eyes, and she knew that there was nothing she could say to make it right. "Jade is fighting for her life in there," Ethan continued, his voice rising with each word. "She's been through hell, and it's all because of you. Your constant criticism, your manipulative games, your selfish behavior. You've torn this family apart, and now you have the audacity to show up here and play the concerned grandmother?" Mona felt tears streaming down her face, hot and shameful. She knew that Ethan was right, that she had no one to blame but herself for the state of their family. "Ethan, please," she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I've made mistakes, and I'm so sorry for all the pain I've caused. But please let me see Jade. Let me be there for her, for all of you." Ethan stared at her for a long moment, his eyes hard and unforgiving. Finally, he stepped aside, allowing her to enter the room. As Mona approached Jade's bedside, she felt a wave of guilt and shame wash over her. Her daughter-in-law lay there, pale and still, her body hooked up to a myriad of machines and monitors. "Jade, I'm so sorry," Mona whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I never meant for things to get this bad. I never meant to hurt you or our family." But even as she spoke the words, Mona knew that they were too little, too late. The damage had been done, and it would take more than a few apologies to make things right. As she sat there holding Jade's hand and praying for a miracle, Mona knew that she had a long road ahead of her, a road of redemption, of making amends for all the pain and suffering she had caused. And she knew that it would be a difficult journey, one that would test her in ways she had never been tested before. But for the sake of her family, for the sake of the precious life growing inside Jade, she knew that she had to try. As I lay in the hospital bed, fighting through the haze of pain and medication, I could hear the sound of raised voices coming from the hallway. At first, I couldn't make out what they were saying, but as the voices grew louder and more agitated, I realized that it was Ethan and Mona. "How could you be so selfish, so cruel?" Ethan shouted, his voice shaking with anger. "Jade is lying in there, fighting for her life, and you couldn't even be bothered to show up until now?" "Ethan, please," Mona pleaded, her voice trembling. "I didn't know how serious it was. I thought—" "You thought what?" Ethan interrupted, his voice dripping with disgust. "That you could just abandon your family, go off on some luxury cruise and everything would be fine? That Jade would just magically get better, and you could come back and play the doting grandmother?" I could hear the shame and regret in Mona's voice as she tried to explain herself, but Ethan wasn't having it. He had seen the toll that her behavior had taken on our family, the pain and suffering that she had caused, and he wasn't about to let her off the hook. "You know, I used to look up to you," Ethan said, his voice growing quieter but no less intense. "I used to think that you were the strongest, most capable person I knew. But now I see you for what you really are. A selfish, manipulative woman who cares more about her own pleasure than the well-being of her own family." Mona started to protest, but Ethan cut her off. "No, I don't want to hear it. You've had your chance, and you blew it. You've caused nothing but pain and heartache for Jade, for our children, and for me, and I won't stand for it anymore." I could hear the sound of footsteps, and then the door to my room opened. Ethan walked in, his face drawn and haggard, but his eyes filled with a fierce determination. "Jade, I'm so sorry," he said, taking my hand in his. "I'm sorry for not standing up to my mother sooner, for not protecting you the way I should have, but I promise things will be different from now on." I nodded, too weak to speak, but I could feel the love and support radiating from him. He had finally seen the truth about his mother, had finally understood the depths of her cruelty and manipulation, and he was ready to make a change. Over the next few days, as I slowly regained my strength, Ethan rarely left my side. He sat with me for hours, holding my hand and talking about our future, about the life we would build together without Mona's toxic influence. And when the time came for me to give birth, he was right there beside me, coaching me through every contraction and cheering me on as I brought our beautiful baby boy into the world. As I held my son in my arms, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and renewal wash over me. We had been through so much, had faced such incredible adversity, but we had come out the other side stronger and more united than ever before. And as I looked into Ethan's eyes, I knew that we would face whatever challenges lay ahead together, as a family. We had each other, and we had the love and support of those who truly cared for us, and that was all we needed to build the life we deserved. In the days and weeks that followed, I learned that Mona's friends, horrified by her behavior, had cut all ties with her. She was left alone and isolated, forced to confront the consequences of her actions and the pain she had caused. But for us, life went on. We moved forward, focusing on our family and the love we shared. And though the scars of the past would always be with us, we knew that we had the strength and resilience to overcome anything that came our way. As I watched Ethan play with our children, his face filled with joy and laughter, I knew that we had finally found the happiness and peace that we had always deserved. And I knew that, no matter what the future held, we would face it together, united in our love and our commitment to each other. As the weeks turned into months, I slowly began to heal, both physically and emotionally. The birth of our son had brought a newfound sense of joy and purpose to our lives, and Ethan and I were determined to cherish every moment we had together as a family. But even as we celebrated this new chapter in our lives, the specter of Mona's betrayal still loomed large. I couldn't shake the feeling of anger and resentment that had taken root in my heart, the sense that she had gotten away with her cruelty and manipulation for far too long. It was during one of my follow-up appointments with the doctor that I finally learned the true extent of Mona's isolation. As I sat in the waiting room, flipping through a magazine, I overheard two of the nurses talking about her. "Did you hear about that awful woman who abandoned her daughter-in-law when she was in the hospital?" one of them said, her voice dripping with disgust. "Yeah, I heard she went on some fancy cruise instead of being there for her family," the other replied. "What kind of monster does that?" I felt a surge of vindication wash over me. It seemed that Mona's actions had finally caught up with her, that the people in her life were starting to see her for who she really was. Later that day, as I was putting away some of the baby's clothes, I found a letter tucked away in the back of the drawer. It was from Mona, written in her familiar spidery handwriting. "Jade," the letter began, "I know that I have caused you and our family a great deal of pain, and for that I am truly sorry. I have spent the last few months reflecting on my actions, and I have come to realize the depths of my selfishness and cruelty." I felt my heart start to race as I read on, my eyes scanning the page for any hint of sincerity or remorse. I know that I can never make up for the harm I have caused, but I want you to know that I am committed to being a better person, a better mother, and a better grandmother. I hope that someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me." I stared at the letter for a long moment, my mind racing with conflicting emotions. A part of me wanted to believe her, to think that she had truly changed and was ready to make amends. But another part of me, the part that had endured years of her manipulation and abuse, knew better. I had seen firsthand the depths of her cruelty, the way she had torn our family apart with her selfish behavior. And so, with a heavy heart, I tore the letter into pieces, watching as the fragments fluttered to the ground like confetti. I knew that I could never forgive Mona, could never let her back into our lives after all the pain she had caused. But I also knew that I couldn't let her betrayal define me, couldn't let it poison the love and happiness that Ethan and I had worked so hard to build. And so, I made a choice to focus on the future, on the life we had created together. A choice to surround myself with people who truly cared for me, who would stand by my side through thick and thin. In the years that followed, Ethan and I watched our children grow and thrive, our love for each other deepening with each passing day. We faced our challenges head-on, united in our commitment to each other and our family. And though the scars of the past would always be with us, we knew that we had the strength and resilience to overcome anything that came our way. As I watched Lily and our son play together in the backyard, their laughter ringing out like music, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We had weathered the storm, had emerged from the darkness stronger and more united than ever before. And I knew that, no matter what the future held, we would face it together, bound by the unbreakable bonds of love and family. Mona's betrayal had taught me the true price of selfishness and cruelty, but it had also shown me the incredible power of forgiveness and hope. And that, I knew, was a lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my life.
My husband had a car accident while he was driving. His leg injuries were severe, and I was certain that he'd be wheelchair-bound for a while. He weakly turned to me in the hospital bed and asked me for help.
"Sorry, but please take care of me."
Even when I saw him like that, I didn't feel any sympathy. I've been getting a cold shoulder from him for a long time. "No way. Not gonna happen," I said with a laugh, and he was left speechless. I casually checked the next bed and was devastated when I saw the person laying there. So, it was true after all. I vowed to myself that I would never help him. I'm Valerie, 33 years old. I work hard as a nurse at the hospital. I have a close friend named Julia, whom I've known since high school. She's quite different from me and has a glamorous and beautiful appearance. Her figure is outstanding, so people often mistake her for a model or actress. She caught the eye of the CEO's son during her corporate days and got married. She's now a homemaker with one son. Despite the significant difference in our circumstances, she's always been a good friend to me. Since she has more experience with guys, I confide in her about my love life. Being a nurse is a demanding job. There are often night shifts, and being called in on days off for emergencies is not uncommon. Because of this, I haven't had much luck in the romance department. When I complained to Julia, she introduced me to Walter, who would later become my husband. He's kind, good-looking, and just an amazing guy. If I were single, I would have pursued him myself. He's such a catch, who's also got a successful career. And so, the blind date was arranged. In a way, Julia could be considered the Cupid who brought us together. As she said, he's a caring and gentlemanly, handsome guy. He excels at his job, and since we're both working, he shares household responsibilities with me. When he popped the question, I was overjoyed, but I also had doubts about whether I was good enough for him. He sweetly said,
"You're perfect for me. I'm drawn to your modesty."
And with that, we got married and started living together in an apartment. I felt deep gratitude for being married to him and owed Julia a lot for bringing us together. Despite having a peaceful life without any major arguments, there's one thing that troubles me. Even after 3 years of marriage, we still haven't conceived a child. We're actively trying, but it just isn't happening. I'm 33 now and felt a sense of urgency due to my age. Nowadays, with the advancements in medical technology, it's not uncommon for people to give birth in their late 30s to their 40s. Given my background in healthcare, I also know the various risks that an advanced maternal age poses to both the mother and the child. That's why I want to have a baby as soon as possible. My longing is so strong that I start considering fertility treatments. One day, I brought up the topic to Walter. I think the reason why we haven't been successful is that both of us or one of us has an issue. I want to get a thorough test to find out. So let's go to the clinic together. I thought that he, who was normally loving and caring, would surely agree. However, my expectations were quickly shattered. He refused to undergo infertility testing, no matter how hard I tried to persuade him.
"No way. It's embarrassing. I'm not infertile, you know. If anything, it's probably you."
His unusual assertiveness made me uneasy. How can you be so sure? You can't determine infertility without a test. His face contorted with anxiety, and he broke into a cold sweat while his eyes darted nervously around the room.
"Well, you know, I just have a feeling. There's nothing particularly wrong with my health anyway."
His suspicious behavior led me to intuit that he was hiding something, although I had no concrete evidence. Our conversation didn't progress, and the topic of infertility treatment remained unresolved. I couldn't help but be curious about what he was hiding. Once you start suspecting someone, you begin to notice things you hadn't before. For instance, he frequently has to work late, despite the number of days on his pay stub not aligning with that. There was even a time when he came home late and had the scent of sweet woman's perfume on him. He brushed it off, saying he had been out for a work event, but it seemed fishy. Furthermore, I often find strands of long hair in his car. We both have short hair, so it makes no sense. He claims that it fell when he had a female colleague in the car, but it just doesn't sit right with me. I doubt that there are any male colleagues with such long hair, and it's hard to believe he regularly gives female colleagues rides. My suspicions about him deepens. So, I decided to confide in Julia about him. She arrived at a cafe, looking all put together in designer clothes, with glossy hair and immaculate makeup. Still as beautiful as ever. Sorry for keeping you waiting. So, what's going on? You said something related to Walter? I explained to her all the suspicious behavior and how his attitude toward infertility treatment was strange. I expected her to offer some advice on how to deal with the suspicion of infidelity. To my surprise, she said it was all my fault. I can't imagine a serious guy like him would cheat. You're just overthinking it. I understand being anxious about not getting pregnant, but that doesn't mean you should take out on him. But there are so many shady things. When I confronted him, he acted strangely. Anyone would freak out if their spouse suddenly accused them of cheating. As for the infertility treatment, if there is nothing wrong with his health, it's natural for him to deny it. Hey, you're not thinking about a divorce over such a minor thing as this, right? It's a shame to part with someone as wonderful as him. She tried to persuade me, which left me feeling incredibly uneasy inside. I thought she'd at least listen to me whine and offer some comfort, even if she didn't give advice. In reality, she defended Walter, who had a suspicion of infidelity, and pointed out that it was my fault. Maybe she felt she had to defend him since she introduced us. Nonetheless, it bothered me that she adamantly took his side. I couldn't help but wonder why. Afterward, I tried to bring up the topic of infertility testing with Walter whenever I could, but he would quickly dodge the subject, citing work commitments. Days passed, but the suspicion of his infidelity didn't clear up, and I couldn't take it anymore. Finally, I decided to dig deeper and question him. Honey, are you hiding something from me? Like something related to other women? He cried out,
Huh?
and flinched. He tried to argue back, but his voice quivered.
Why would you suddenly say something like that? I would never hide anything from you.
I want to trust you too. But lately, you've been acting strangely. You're not straightforward about the hair in the car or the perfume. And you've been avoiding the topic of infertility treatment. Is there something you're keeping from me? I asked, looking him in the eyes, and he averted his gaze. After a silence that lasted for about half a minute, he suddenly yelled at me.
Shut up. Who do you think you are to accuse me like this? And nobody like you got to marry someone like me. You're so out of line. Just listen to me and stay quiet.
His outburst was so intense that it shocked me. He had never yelled at me since we got together.
All this trouble with having a child is all your fault. There's nothing wrong with me. Marrying a woman like you is like drawing the short straw,
he declared, and then stormed off to the bedroom. I was left stunned by the whole ordeal. To think he could hurl such insults at me just because I asked a few questions. At the same time, I became even more distrustful of him. If he had nothing to hide, why didn't he calmly deny the accusations? His anger seemed unusual. I was sure there was something going on. The next day, he left for work without having breakfast. When he came back home, he threw a petition for divorce at me.
I'll let yesterday's incident slide, because I'm a forgiving person. But next time you complain about me, it's a divorce.
He threatened arrogantly. He seemed to think that I would stay silent and endure it. Honestly, I had plenty of things to say to him. It was clear to me that he was the one acting fishy, so I didn't understand why I should be the one to back down. Unfortunately, the fact remained that there was no concrete evidence of his affair. I humbly apologized for accusing him and kept the form on hand for the time being. He looked satisfied as he listened to my apology, but in my mind, I was preoccupied with how to uncover his secret. Although a private investigator was expensive, I was considering hiring one, but things took an unexpected turn. I received a call from someone who revealed his affair and even told me the identity of his mistress. The story was so shocking that it made my head spin. While I had expected his infidelity, the identity of his mistress was a surprise. The person who provided the information had no reason to lie to me, and later he showed me evidence that backed up what he said. I was devastated and ended up in tears. Once I composed myself, I was filled with anger toward both Walter and his mistress. I vowed not to let them get away and swore to bring them down. One day I came home to find Walter packing his suitcase. He seemed to be in a good mood, even humming a tune.
"Oh, you're home. Good timing. I'm sorry for the suddenness, but I'm heading out on a business trip now. I'll be away for about a week, so please, take care of the house," he nonchalantly announced. Of course, I couldn't just nod in agreement because there was something important we needed to discuss. "Wait, I have something important to talk to you about." As soon as I said that, his face turned noticeably sour. He probably thought I was going to bring up the infertility topic again. When I tried to speak, he cut me off saying, "Enough already. I've told you many times. There's nothing wrong with me, so I won't go for the test. You're being annoying. I'm in a hurry. I'm leaving now." I tried to tell him that wasn't it, but he didn't listen and quickly left. I told myself not to show any mercy upon his return. I suppressed the urge to scream in anger and wished for some divine retribution to befall him. Surprisingly, my wish came true quite easily. A few hours after he left, I received a call from the police. "Your husband and his sister have been in a car accident and were urgently transported to the hospital." Apparently, he had been driving too fast and couldn't navigate a curve, resulting in a crash. By the way, he's an only child, so there was no sister to be with him. Most likely, the woman with him was his mistress. I rushed to the hospital and spoke to the doctor. Walter has severe leg injuries, and it was confirmed that he would be in a wheelchair for the foreseeable future. I went to his room to check on him. When he saw me, he seemed somewhat uncomfortable, but he managed a weak smile and asked me for a favor. "You must have heard it from the doctor, but I'll be living in a wheelchair from now on. I'm sorry for the trouble, but I'm asking you to take care of me." In a healthy, loving marriage, if a spouse were asked to take care of the other, they would probably agree without hesitation. However, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Take care of you? That's impossible. No doubt about it. He was left dumbfounded by my response. He clearly hadn't expected me to refuse him. I stared at him with a mocking look. "Did you really think I hadn't realized yet? The person you were with was your mistress, wasn't she? You lied about having a sister, even though you're an only child." He was turning pale as he listened. He either couldn't find the words to defend himself or just couldn't make a sound but kept opening and closing his mouth. Ignoring him, I opened the curtain to the adjacent bed where his sister was supposed to be resting. There, I found my best friend Julia. The doctor said that she too was seriously injured and required nursing care. I gazed at her for a while, and then I glared at Walter. So, she was your mistress after all. In fact, it was her husband who informed me about their affair. He had suspected her infidelity
hired a private investigator, and discovered that Walter was her partner. Apparently, they had been seeing each other for quite some time. She didn't want to give up her luxurious lifestyle with her husband and had proposed to Walter to marry me as a cover-up. There was an even more shocking and dreadful revelation. The son she had given birth to wasn't her husband's, it was Walter's. Her husband had become suspicious because the son looked nothing like him and had conducted a DNA test and confirmed that there was no biological relationship between them. When I saw the son's face, which bore a striking resemblance to Walter, I was amazed. He was so certain he had no issue because Julia had given birth to his child. It made sense to deny being infertile with a track record like that. When he looked at me and Julia's husband with despair, I crushed him with another wave of bad news. So, we're getting a divorce. I'll make sure to claim alimony too. I have a lawyer already, so be prepared, I declared, ready to leave. But he shouted,
Wait. I was wrong. Julia was persistent, and I ended up continuing the affair. I genuinely love you. You know that, right, honey? I'll break up with her. Please, reconsider the divorce.
He pleaded earnestly, but his words had no effect on my heart. Instead, my disappointment in him grew. He was just trying to secure me as a caregiver and, as a bonus, avoid the alimony claim. His selfishness infuriated me. It was the perfect time to confront him head on. I took a deep breath and gave him a piece of my mind. So, this is your true nature, huh? How pathetic, trying to put the blame on her and sell her out to save yourself. I have to say, I feel sorry for her now. No chance I'll ever get back together with a despicable man like you.
Please, don't say that. You're the only one for me.
Ugh, you're making me sick. After cheating and even having an illegitimate child? Such rubbish talk won't work for me. Besides, I've already submitted the form you gave me, so I have no obligation to help you anymore. Don't ever come near me again, I retorted, and this time I walked out of the room for real. I could hear his anguished voice from behind, but I didn't look back. Several months later, Walter, Julia, her husband, and I were all divorced. Julia's husband and I each claimed alimony from our ex-spouses, but neither of them had enough money. They ended up borrowing from loan sharks to pay us. 6 months after we divorced, they got married, but they seemed to be struggling. Walter couldn't handle the judgmental eyes of colleagues who had found out about how the accident led to his divorce, so he left his job. His relatives and friends severed ties with him, and despite needing caregiving for his wheelchair-bound condition, no one would lend a hand. They're leading a miserable life, juggling multiple part-time jobs and day labor just to make ends meet and raise their child. Meanwhile, I'm savoring my carefree single life. I chose to see this as a reward granted by fate. That's what I tell myself now.
My name is Sophie, 49 years old. My husband Kevin and I have been married for 20 years, and our son just moved out of state for college last year, so we recently have more time to ourselves. I have just started working part-time to help fund my son. I had been a stay-at-home mom since my son was born, so I had a lot of trouble getting the hang of things at first. However, these days, I have started to feel that I'm making a difference in the workplace, and my opinions have been adopted, which I find very rewarding. Hey Kevin, I've heard that I'm going to get a small raise. It's nice to have your hard work appreciated, isn't it? I was in a happy mood, so I talked to Kevin, who was watching TV in a daze. Then,
So you mean you can live on your own now?
my husband suddenly asked me, something out of the blue. What? I thought I had misheard, so I gave him a confused look.
It's good timing, actually. I was about to tell you.
He turns to me and starts talking. The grin on my husband's face gives me a bad feeling.
I've got a new cute girlfriend, so I don't need you anymore.
My mind freezes at the unexpected words.
Get the divorce papers and marriage resignation from the country office tomorrow.
He said without a second thought. It was so sudden that I didn't know what was going on. What do you mean? Do you mean I'm divorcing you because I found a new woman? I'm getting remarried to her. As the situation became clearer, I could feel my body trembling. My husband laughed at me.
I can still live as a man. Unlike you, who gave up on being a woman a long time ago. We haven't made love in so long that there's no point in staying together.
How rude of him. Let him say all he wants. What he said was true about making love, but that doesn't mean I abandoned being a woman. In fact, I don't want a flabby middle-aged man to ask me to feel attracted to him sexually. I was angry, but at the same time, I burst out in laughter for some reason. I'm tired, I'm busy, I don't feel like it. Wasn't it you who said all these things and avoided me? It's hilarious that you want to live as a man now. Then my husband's face suddenly turned grim.
What's so funny? Don't be silly, old hag.
He was rough and foul with me like that. Then he folded his arms and leaned back.
You're a far cry from Melody. She's in love with me, and she even says I'm the best. She brags that I'm the best boyfriend she'd ever had. On the other hand, how about you? You got a race, eh? You're such a small-minded airhead feeling happy about such a thing.
Kevin was apparently very proud of this Melody and started looking down on me. Melody? Was that her name? Melody? Melody? We're not in music class here. Kevin then proudly started to introduce Melody's background. She's in her mid-20s, more than 10 years younger than me, and has a nighttime job. And she's pregnant with his child. Nowadays, it is not usual to have a marriage with a big difference in age, but a parent having a child with a woman not much older than his son? Just the thought was horrific.
You know, in life, you need love. You're like a cold, stiff, dried-up mango, while Melody is like a freshly picked one. It's not worth spending money on you.
My husband attacked me with his words. So it's love bought with money. So you are putting aside the fact that you're going to get shriveled up and choose a young, hot girl. I see. So you've switched to a young girl who is just after money and has no moral restraint about cheating with a married man. When I pointed this out to him, he spit as he shouted,
I told you it's not about money. It's about love. Anyways, I'm serious. I need to marry Melody and reassure her happiness as soon as possible. Pack up your stuff and get out of here as soon as possible.
Well, how good is he at laying out all his reasons? I was so stunned, I was out of words. At the same time, I found it somewhat comical. How long had it been since this person had used the word love to me? I'm sure this Melody woman, being in the same position as me after a while. With time and with age, such temporary feelings just fade away. Rather, I think that the terrible words my husband is throwing at me now will be directed at this Melody next. You really are a lousy man. I should have realized this before we got married. When I think about it, I have taken on all the housework and childcare. My husband, instead of lending a helping hand, began to criticize me for not doing enough of this and that, even though it was a time when such things were still common. He never said a single word of appreciation, let alone love. And then, After all my hard work, he disposed of me and replaced me with a younger woman. He was insane. But Kevin seems to take my words as a sign of defeat.
Well, it's all good then. Anyway, I will finish the paperwork on my next day off. Just make sure you have both of them ready.
He said this and left for his room. For the next few days, I had sleepless nights and tears of frustration, but I tried to appear unfazed. The next day off, my husband had invited the woman over to our house. "Hi, Gary's old wife. I've come to take care of the paperwork." The woman, Melody, sat on the sofa humming a tune and crossed her legs high in the air. As Kevin said, she was young, and you can tell from her behavior that she is confident about her appearance. She worked in a nightclub, so she had heavy makeup and revealing clothes that were designed to show off her breasts. Her skirt was so short that even I, as a woman, had trouble deciding where to look. But I sensed that she was not in love with Kevin. If my intuition is right, her purpose must be. Already prepared for divorce, I confronted her. I didn't want to resist, but I was caught up in her words and actions. "You're a Melody, right? Did you start dating Kevin knowing he was a married man? And by calling me his old wife, I assume you understand both our positions in the relationship." She giggles. "I'm not stupid. Don't underestimate me, old woman. You're the one who is going to get dumped, and I'm going to be Kevin's wife from now on. See? It's that simple." She smirked and scorned me. "Well, I'm glad you answered so smoothly. I got it all on tape. So of course you know that I can claim alimony from you, right?" I showed her the recorder, recording our conversation. She looked annoyed and cold. "Kevin, you said your old wife was going to be easy. This is not what you told me," and complained to my husband. Kevin tried to calm her down.
Don't worry about it. I've got it all covered. What's the matter, Mel? Don't be so angry.
Kevin, Mel? Their conversation was disgusting. As I was frowning at them, my husband pulled out a document.
I want you to write the divorce papers with these conditions.
There, the terms of divorce, including alimony and pension division, were written down. What? You're going to give this woman $300,000? The money for me is going to be all gone. I didn't need to press the issue, but she was very open about what was going on in her head. She kept repeating all gone, and so I was convinced. She was after my husband's father's inheritance, currently undergoing the process of inheriting.
It's okay, Mel. This includes child support for my son.
My husband, who is trying to quiet her, seems to find even her blatant attitude endearing. So it's a severance package. That's expensive. I struggled to contain my anger that had reached its peak. Anyway, I was convinced that my intuition was right, so I added, if you can notarize the terms of the divorce, this will be fine. And please make the payment in one lump sum. I kept my response to a minimum, and my husband agreed to these terms, knowing that our conversation was being recorded. Are you done yet? We finished filling out the divorce papers under the urge of the bored woman. Old wife, you have to leave here by the end of the month, okay? I'm going to cancel the lease on the place I'm living in. I will file for divorce when it's notarized. As soon as that's done, I'll leave. When I replied, she grumbled and complained again with a disgruntled look on her face, as if she was planning to move out right away, but left without any choice. After some time, the notarization process was completed, and we were divorced. And just as if she was waiting for that, she came to kick me out. Come on, get out of here! She was extremely cheerful. "We've just registered our marriage. Now I'm Kevin's wife. This lovely house is mine." She was annoyingly excited, dancing around the room, so I reluctantly handed her the key to the front door. I wanted to make sure of something before I left. Isn't Kevin about the same age as your parents? If you call me an old woman, then Kevin, who is older than me, is an old man, right? Why did you choose such a man to marry? I asked her. Her open and honest answer was exactly what I expected. "Kevin is the general manager of the prestigious company. This house had been remodeled a while ago, and is close to the station. It's a stylish house too. I will just have to buy new furniture to my liking." She was dreaming. "Kevin treats me like a princess. He's old and not handsome, but he says he will buy me anything I want." She sneered at me, as if to say, "My future is secure. I hope you get your way then." With a sigh, I left the house I had lived in for so many years. I then moved into our college dormitory. I was hired as a living dorm staff, quite a rarity these days. I had been working in a company cafeteria until then. When I explained my situation to my part-time employer, that I was leaving Kevin for a fresh start, my boss, who appreciated my usual work, called the head office. I was grateful to accept the job at the dormitory, which had just become vacant due to the retirement of an employee. I was so glad I had my nutritionist certification. The rent and utilities are super cheap. I don't have a lot of free time to go out, but it is a very comfortable and fun place to work. About 3 months into my new life, I received a phone call from my ex-husband.
"Mom is having a hard time. I need you to help me take care of her."
What kind of person would say such a thing? You and I are strangers now. It makes sense for your new wife to take care of her, doesn't it? When I point out the most obvious thing, he said,
"Melody is pregnant. Mom has dementia and throws things around, so it's too dangerous."
"So it's okay for her to throw things at me?" That's great logic, but no thank you. I don't want anything to do with you anymore, so don't you dare call me again. I pushed him away violently. I have known his mother for 20 years, and although we didn't have any major battles, we didn't get along with each other that well. Besides, I had just started my new life on my own, so I couldn't afford to take care of her elsewhere. But my husband somehow found out where I was and came to see me with that woman.
"I need some help. If you can't take care of her, then I want the money back that I paid as alimony."
That's another insane thing to say. I don't think I'm obligated to comply with such a demand. When I coldly rejected, Melody glared at me with a terrible look in her eyes. "Old hag! You knew everything, you liar! The inheritance I was counting on was nothing, and he's in debt!" With a shout of abuse, the papers she had thrown at me were scattered about. "Don't you call me a liar? You just assured that Kevin had a fortune." "Oh, please." I intentionally shrugged and shook my head. When I was going through the inheritance process of my late father-in-law, I found out that he actually owed a lot of money. If that were all, we could have simply renounced the inheritance. But to my surprise, Kevin had canceled my father-in-law's cell phone and converted his household goods and precious metals into cash. The law prohibits the renunciation of inheritance if the property is touched before the procedure, and that is exactly what happened. As a result, the debt fell directly on them. So I told them proudly, Kevin had thrown all the inheritance procedures to me, and he didn't try to listen to my words. But Melody, he took his father's property in order to get enough money to continue the relationship with you.
"I think you should have told me something so important,"
Kevin complains. But that's exactly what I wanted to say. You didn't listen when you should have. So you two have to take responsibility now. What? I didn't hear anything about it. I didn't know. She's pale-faced and flustered.
So you're just going to take the money and run away?
They were coming at me, but I didn't care. That's a funny thing to say. If you hadn't cheated on your wife, you didn't have to make money for your affair partner, and you could have renounced the inheritance with no problem. You're the one who definitely caused this situation. He growled and backed away as if frightened. And you're the one who knew he was married, had relations with him for his property, had a child with him, and kicked me out, right, Melody? You're in that position now because you earned it. I told the woman, young enough to be my daughter. If this was going to happen, I don't need such an old man. I still had something to say. Do you remember the notarized divorce papers? I got alimony, pension division, and child support from Kevin. But separate from that, I can claim alimony from you. What? Is $300,000 not enough for you? You are so greedy. She shouts and curses at me. Well, I was going to forget about it if you guys would just leave me alone now, that I'm no longer a part of your lives. But you have been unreasonable, demanding that I take care of your mother and return the already paid alimony and so on. I've lost my patience with this kind of behavior. I told her that I still have a recording of the conversation about the terms of the divorce, and that I was serious about filing a claim for alimony. By then, she started running away without looking back. I watched her run and turned to Kevin, who was still standing there. How can she run that fast when she is in the last trimester of her pregnancy? Is she really pregnant? And she's gone now. So, what were you saying about love? Kevin gasped at my question.
It's all my fault, and I'm sorry. So please come back.
He looked so old and tired as he pleaded with tears in his eyes. No, thank you. You're welcome to leave now.
Sophie!
My ex-husband, who was crying aloud, was pathetic. But considering what he had done, there was no need for forgiveness. Then, as I predicted, Melody disappeared, leaving the signed divorce paper. Apparently, the pregnancy was also a lie. My ex-husband was left alone to take care of his dad and his mother, and he was now thin from exhaustion and overwork. My new life in the dormitory seems to suit me, and recently, I have been getting compliments on how young I look, honestly, without I will continue to live honestly without conceit. Everyone, please be careful in the event of a divorce.
Lisa, Daddy got you cake.
Yay! Thanks, Daddy. Can I see it? Today is our 4-year-old daughter's birthday. Even my often swamped husband made it home early. So we're having a birthday celebration as a family. But as Lisa excitedly opened the box, she burst into tears. The next moment, she suddenly starts crying. This isn't for me. What? I take a closer look at the tasty strawberry cake, especially the chocolate flake on top. To my surprise, another girl's name is on it. What happened here? I shot Brian a puzzled look, but he's visibly thrown off. My name is Erin, a 33-year-old working mom. I work at City Hall. I've always been in a hectic department and have been a diligent worker. Before I realized I was in my late 20s without a boyfriend. That's when I decided to sign up with a matchmaking agency. There I met Brian, who later became my husband. Brian is a corporate guy at a big company. From our first interaction, he was sweet to me, and he was a true gentleman on our dates. I quickly fell head over heels for him. Soon after, we started dating, and a year later, we got engaged. Both our families were thrilled for us, and we had our wedding and got our marriage certificate. That evening, he said to me,
Erin, let's start a happy family together.
Yeah, I love that. How many kids are you thinking?
Whoa, jumping the gun there. But definitely 2. I want a household filled with laughter.
Sounds like a plan. About 6 months into our marriage, I discovered I was pregnant. He was ecstatic and stood by me throughout the pregnancy. Eventually, I gave birth to our first daughter, Lisa. Both our families were over the moon about Lisa. In that moment, I felt on top of the world. Both our folks live quite a distance from us, so we decided to raise Lisa by ourselves. I took maternity leave, but he couldn't because of his job. But this proved to be tougher than we anticipated. Lisa would often cry at night and was pretty demanding. She'd calm down when held, but would wail the second she was set down. I ended up cradling her nearly non-stop. While my husband started off helping with our baby, he slowly backed off. He even got to where he'd say,
She's too noisy. Can you get her to stop?
Babies cry. I'm doing my best here. I replied as I comforted Lisa, but he remained upset.
I have work in the morning. I need some sleep.
I haven't slept properly in days. Can you pitch in every now and then?
Why? I'm working all day.
But she's our daughter. He didn't let me finish, just sighed loudly and left the room. I had read in parenting articles that it's common for couples to clash when dealing with a new baby. I foolishly thought we'd be the exception. I never dreamed our relationship would get this tense. While dealing with our relationship issues, I faced the immediate challenges of motherhood. A year after her birth, Lisa was still a handful at night, and I was close to my wit's end. While I absolutely adore her, the sleep deprivation and lack of personal time wore me out. Brian barely chipped in with Lisa, leaving me to shoulder most of the parenting. After 2 years of maternity leave, I came to a decision. I think I'll head to my parents for a bit with Lisa. I told Brian. My mom had recently retired and was available. And rather than her traveling to us, I thought I'd take Lisa and stay with my parents for a few months. He looked almost relieved when I told him.
That's a great idea. If your mom's willing to help, that's a weight off. Go ahead,
he said, without any hint of missing either Lisa or me. Yeah, I'll keep you posted about her through emails. You'll be by yourself. Are you good with that?
I lived on my own for a while, so I'll be okay. Just go and enjoy your time with your folks.
Thanks. With that, I chose to head back to my parents' place for 3 months with my 1-year-old daughter. Honestly, staying at my parents' was pretty relaxing. With them helping out, I could catch up on sleep and even have some me time. It felt so good to finally sip tea at a coffee shop after what felt like forever. Lisa began to smile more, and her nighttime crying gradually decreased. This was a much-needed break for me. While at my parents', I often sent Brian pictures of Lisa. He didn't always respond, but when he did, he'd mention how adorable she looked, which comforted me. After the 3-month stay, I felt refreshed and more confident in taking care of Lisa. I couldn't wait to see Brian. With that excitement, I headed home. As I had hoped, Brian welcomed us with a smile, saying,
Good to have you back.
He seemed more rested too. Over dinner, we discussed how Lisa had been doing over the past few months. Then something stood out to me. Where's your wedding ring? He'd always worn the band we got when we married, but now it was gone.
Well, the thing is, I lost it,
he confessed, looking uneasy. I replied, taken aback. Really? Should we get you a new one?
No, we'll have childcare expenses. We're still married, ring or no ring. Is that okay?
Yeah, I suppose. These things happen. After that, he never wore his wedding ring again. Around the time I got back from my parents, he began claiming work had ramped up, and he was seldom home. He put in extra hours almost every weekday, and often went out on weekends for work. He didn't pitch in with housework or childcare, leaving all of it to me. Yet through all the chaos, I never questioned him. Time sped up, and soon Lisa was nearing her 4th birthday. She can now recognize the alphabet and has become quite the talkative and bubbly kid. I reminded my perpetually occupied husband, Don't forget, Lisa's birthday, and remember to pick up the cake. He somewhat reluctantly agreed. The day of Lisa's 4th birthday came around. To my astonishment, Brian made it home early, cake in tow. I whipped up a special meal, and we celebrated together. After eating, it was cake time.
Lisa, Daddy got you a cake.
Yay! Thanks, Daddy. Can I see it? But as Lisa excitedly opened the box, she burst into tears. This isn't for me. What? I glanced at the cake, taken aback. The gorgeous strawberry cake had a chocolate label stating, Happy birthday, Sarah. What happened here? I shot Brian a puzzled look, but he's visibly thrown off.
Oh, maybe the bakery messed up? Yeah, that must be it.
Excuse me?
They looked swamped. They might have mixed up orders. I'm sorry, Lisa. They messed up your name.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, I'll talk to them later. Let's eat for now, alright?
He tried to explain, but something felt off. A nagging doubt crossed my mind, but he wouldn't. Despite my internal conflict, I served the cake and continued the festivities. Days rolled on, and I couldn't shake that feeling. I prayed I was overthinking, but I needed to know for sure. So I reached out to a well-known detective agency nearby and used my old savings to have them look into Brian. 3 weeks later, the detective agency called me in, and I found myself at a coffee shop. I opened the envelope they handed me, and my worst fears, which I'd somehow known deep down, were confirmed. So, this is it. Brian, I'll never forgive you. My hand, holding the envelope tight, shook with anger. A week later, I left Lisa with a close friend and asked Brian to join me in a private dining room. The excuse was to celebrate our wedding anniversary. Actually, it really was our anniversary. When he showed up a bit late, I gestured for him to sit across from me.
Wow, it's been ages since it's been just the two of us for dinner. Here's to our anniversary,
he said, trying to keep things light as he raised his wine glass. I responded, Hold on, we need to talk about something first.
What's going on?
Care to explain this? I spread out photos on the table, which showed him at a family diner with a woman I didn't recognize and a young girl, around 5 years old. There was also a picture of him going into what looked like their house.
What are these? Why do you have them?
I hired a detective. This woman is Jennifer. The little girl is Sarah. The same name on the cake for Lisa's birthday. You guys look pretty happy. Almost like a family. What's the deal here? He shifted uncomfortably in his seat.
Listen, aren't you jumping to conclusions? Jennifer is my boss's younger sister.
Your boss's?
Yeah, his sister. You know, she's like a friend. She's a single mom and was having a tough time. So, I was just being a listening ear. Given my relationship with my boss, I couldn't just brush her off.
He started to make flimsy excuses. I sighed and shot off a quick text to someone.
See? You're just getting the wrong idea. The cake mix-up? Sarah's birthday was just around the corner. So, I got confused.
He kept talking. But then, the door to our private room swung open.
What the?
He looked up, stunned. There, standing in the doorway, was the woman from the photos, Jennifer. Thanks for coming, Jennifer. She nodded slightly and took a seat next to me. When I got the report from the detective, I had also learned about her and decided to reach out. She stared coldly at Brian. So, I'm your boss's sister, huh? That's not our relationship if I remember correctly. You were just listening to me? How could you spin it that way? We were clearly involved. You even stepped in as a father figure for Sarah. She shot Brian a fierce look, and he went pale. Jennifer had been wary when I first approached her as Brian's wife. But as we chatted, she pieced together the truth and was deeply upset, apologizing many times. She's a single mom, raising her 5-year-old Sarah. Their relationship started when he randomly approached her on the street. When I asked about when they met, it lined up with when I was away and when he started being out more. She had no clue he was married, especially since he never wore a wedding ring. He had been sweet to her and her daughter, even hinting at the possibility of marriage. Brian looked at me, his face pale and filled with panic. We're on to you. Just come clean already. After a beat, he hesitated, then began to talk. He confessed that he felt overlooked as I was so focused on our daughter Lisa. During a trip I took to my hometown, he had met a gorgeous woman named Jennifer, thinking it'll just be a brief fling. But he'd unintentionally fallen hard for her. Still, he had no plans to leave me and hoped to carry on with his double life. I whispered sharply, "Did you really think you could pull that off?" My words clearly unnerved him. Jennifer jumped in. "Brian, how could you lie to both of us? I could take you to court for pretending to marry me."
take me to court?
He blurted out, looking alarmed. She went on. Plus, you lied about where you work. You're at XX Company, aren't you?
Well, I mean...
You're familiar with Garrett Enterprises, right? Paul Garrett runs it.
Huh?
He looked totally lost.
Yeah, we do business with them. What's that got to do with anything?
Did you forget my last name? The guy heading Garrett Enterprises? That's my dad. Turns out he had inadvertently started a relationship with the daughter of a key business associate.
I had no clue. There are plenty of Garretts out there. How was I supposed to know?
He muttered. But she wasn't done. My dad's really close to both me and Sarah. When I filled him in on your antics, he was mad. Hope you're ready for what's coming at work. He was dumbstruck. In desperation, he turned to me.
Aaron, you wouldn't leave me, would you? I'm Lisa's dad. You're doing well at your job, so you could help me out for a bit. We can still make a go for it, the three of us.
Annoyed, I splashed my water in his face. Seriously? We're done. I'll be expecting compensation for your cheating, half of what we own, and child support. Time to pay up and say you're sorry, you jerk. He looked down, whispering,
I'm really sorry.
In the end, Brian and I split. Just like I said, I demanded he pay for cheating. Half of everything we owned, and child support. I took half of our shared apartment and our savings, and he agreed to pay $70,000 for the affair. He also committed to monthly child support payments. Jennifer's influence got him fired. And to make matters worse for him, she also demanded payment, which wiped out his savings. Jobless, without his family, he moved into a rundown apartment and hunted for work. When he did land a job, it only paid about half his previous salary. And given his child support obligations, life was hard. But I had zero pity for him. He brought all this on himself and deserved what he got. Meanwhile, Lisa and I were doing well, and Jennifer became kind of a friend. We sometimes catch up over tea with our kids. I'm excited about what the future holds and watching Lisa grow up.
Why is the remittance to Mom only $670? Only $670?
My husband yells. I had reached my limit. Take a good look at the contents of your mother's account on that paper, I said bluntly. My name is Penelope, and I'm 42 years old. I work part-time at a supermarket. I have 2 sons, Ethan in 8th grade and Leo in 6th grade. My husband is Asher, and he's 43 years old. Asher's mother, my mother-in-law, is 67 years old. Since her husband passed away, my mother-in-law has been living alone. Even though she's eligible for a pension, the amount is still low in these difficult times. When my father-in-law died, we discussed it.
I owe him for raising me. In the future, he'll probably become weaker too. If I think of it as a caregiving expense,
I've decided to send a monthly allowance of $335. They said the house loan is also paid off. Recently, my late father-in-law left behind an inheritance of $200,000. The inheritance left by my father-in-law. In accordance with my father-in-law's will, my husband, who is an only child, agreed to have my mother-in-law receive the entire amount. I had a feeling that maybe we could get by with that. Living with no income and watching money deplete is scary. So my mother-in-law said this, and, well, I can understand her point to some extent. Therefore, I started giving her an allowance, albeit symbolically. However, not even a year had passed since that decision when my mother-in-law called in tears, leading to a dispute over the allowance amount. Because of COVID, I can't go to the cheaper supermarket. So that's why she can't save.
Well, it's true that COVID can be scary for some people,
said my husband. That's right. It's because going out is scary. In that case, when there's something you want to buy, just let me know. On my way back from work, I can pick it up from the specified supermarket if you like, I suggested. Then my mother-in-law responded, That's not it. That's not it. It's not just groceries. It's also everyday items, she began to say. Well, I guess that makes sense. So it's not just about food. Ah, I see. Okay, then I'll go to the designated store for everyday items as well, I said, and my mother-in-law exclaimed, Honestly, do I have to spell it out this much for you to understand? It's not just everyday items and groceries, is it? Things like hair dye to cover gray hair too. That as well, she shouted. In other words, please don't make a mother like me spell it out this much. I'm saying that the allowance isn't enough.
I'm sorry, Mother.
My husband's body language also seemed overly apologetic towards his mother over the phone.
For now, I'll increase it to $670,
he said, without consulting me. Huh? $670? It's quite a significant amount. I couldn't hide my surprise at the decision made without my consent. Speaking of $670, it's almost like taking all of my part-time job earnings. Plus, our older child will be taking entrance exams soon, and we can't skip on sending them to cram school. I asked the store manager to increase my part-time hours, but in doing so, it became challenging to manage the household.
Mom, you're never home at night,
my younger child complained. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Mom is working hard to earn money for us. I lowered my head and said,
I made a really cool piggy bank today and got praised for it. But I can't even talk about that now.
He banged on the table. I'm sorry. I'll buy the toy you wanted for your birthday, so I'll work hard for that. I tried to reassure by reiterating the promise to buy the toy my second son wanted, and at that moment, my husband walked by.
Just be patient with the toy. Grandma is making even more sacrifices and going through tough times. Your mother isn't working for the sake of your toys. She's working for your grandmother, my husband said and left, leaving me feeling guilty that even for our child's birthday gift, we were cutting back for my mother-in-law's sake. And the way he said that, I began to wonder, who am I really working for? My husband's words left me confused. Strangely, our younger child remained and patted my shoulder. Mom, you're doing your best. I can't wait for the toy, so don't worry.
However, that wavering feeling was once again compounded by my mother-in-law. Have you received the envelope? I received a call from my mother-in-law, her voice already trembling. Yes, I replied. I think you can already guess from that. Certainly today, I received an envelope from my mother-in-law. When I opened it, it contained a copy of a bank statement. I immediately looked at the remaining balance. Huh? I was surprised, and my voice slipped out unintentionally. $6. It's already less than $10. See? In response to my huh, my mother-in-law seemed to understand that I had seen the contents of the envelope, and her voice quivered with tears. And then, due to the price increases, I can't even pay the electricity and gas bills. Her tearful voice turned into sobbing. But... I tried to continue speaking while looking at the statement. Then, enough! All you do is talk about do this, do that, spouting off about useless things and dragging your feet. Last time, too, it was all about doing errands for household items and groceries, and they were useless solutions. That's why I called at this hour. You're there, aren't you, Asher? Take over for me. I could sense from the phone conversation. My husband had already come close, and he said,
Mom, let me take over.
As he took the receiver from me.
Yeah.
After this exchange, Asher said,
Huh? Oh no. Letting her use up the entire inheritance? Letting the balance drop below $10? I'm sorry. I think this is definitely a misfortune for my humble parents. Yeah. I understand. So starting from next month, if I send $2,000 each month, will that be okay?
He blurted out. What? $2,000? How on earth could the allowance amount be that much? I was standing there in shock as I listened. After he hung up the phone, Asher exclaimed,
Why is the allowance for Mom only $670? Only $670. I told you, at least $670. I thought you had increased it.
He shouted angrily. But you see, inside that envelope... I tried to make a counter-argument, but he interrupted me and continued.
I told you, I owe her for raising me. In the future, she'll probably become weaker. If you think of it as caregiving expenses. Why is it that my mother is in such a heartbreaking situation?
He further escalated his outburst with a louder voice. I was at my limit too. Even the $335 allowance wasn't easy to manage. I thought it was an accomplishment to increase it to $670. I also increased my part-time hours to cope with the situation. I even learned how to cook more budget-friendly meals than before. I managed the household expenses with all of those efforts. But my efforts alone weren't enough. And there were sacrifices I made in return, like the time with my children. Yet on top of it all, an additional $2,000? And what's more, without even looking at how our allowances being used in my mother-in-law's bank statement, she scolded me abruptly and decided on a $2,000 allowance without consulting me. Above all, I'm working for the sake of my sons, not for my mother-in-law. That's enough. A deeply cold voice came from me. I realized that when a person gets too angry, their voice becomes quiet.
What do you mean? It's fine. Are you getting defensive now?
In a somewhat mocking tone, my husband looked down on me. I was no longer willing to yield to my husband's words. After having seen a copy of that statement, I absolutely couldn't accept such a ridiculous proposal as a $2,000 allowance. I've had enough of a son who blindly believes and supports a money-seeking mother and grandmother. People who can't prioritize our family don't belong here. Get out. If you want to support your mother so badly, then go live with her. You can happily go to hell together. I pushed my husband firmly. Then I kicked him out the front door. And this. I walked my husband out the front door. I shoved the envelope in his face. I'll send your belongings back, and you'll cover the shipping. Take a close look at the contents of your mother's bank statement.
Huh?
My husband asked in response, but I just closed the door with a loud bang.
What's going on, Mom?
Hearing the commotion, our two children came downstairs. Well, you two, your father said he wants to spend more money on you, and he asked Grandma to spend more too. I couldn't stand it any longer, so I say to the children,
I see. If you decided this, Mom, it must be for the best, for this house. I'll follow your lead.
My older child said.
Well, that toy, I'll wait for it until I'm an adult, no matter how many years it takes. So, I'll cheer up.
My younger son said to me, Thank you, my sons. 1 week later,
Help me.
my husband called me. What about? I replied coldly.
Couldn't you at least listen to my story? I know what you meant when you said to look at the statement. I can't believe after all this time that I know what that means.
He stammers. But my husband keeps going, clinging to his speech. I had to stifle my laughter on the phone. I can't believe that you would believe your mother wholeheartedly and then blurt out such an outrageous proposal. I can't believe you're calling me now and wanting to get back together. You really have no idea how brazen you are.
Huh?
That's just how you are. You're the type who, in moments like this, says, huh? And questions everything. Oblivious to your own indecisiveness, you casually involve others. When pointed out, you react as if it's unexpected. Well, but I suppose it wouldn't hurt to have one final conversation. I want to deliver those last words in person. It's important for the children, and closure matters. I have agreed to meet with my husband in this house. Oh, and make sure to bring all of your mother's credit card statements. Okay? I added that. My husband and mother-in-law came. Their lives were in disarray. I'm sure. I thought this was going to be an absolute bust. If you'd just calmed down and looked at the statement, you'd have figured it out. You insulted me outright and ended up believing your mother, didn't you? I respond nonchalantly. So, can you show me the statement? My husband put the statement out on the table with trembling hands, and while looking down at it, What have you learned? I asked. And then,
My mom. She used the money I sent her. Electricity, gas, food. It wasn't just for living expenses,
he said in a voice barely louder than a mosquito's buzz. It wasn't just for living expenses, was it? Actually, the other purpose was the main one, right? Please, say it with your own mouth.
She was a member of an escort club.
I'll actually get my husband to say it. His withered confession, accompanied by my mother-in-law's trembling lips. I was absolutely delighted, and I couldn't help but laugh. That's right. Your mother, whom you believed more than me, was a woman who spent money on male escorts, while lying about not being able to pay the increased electricity and gas bills, and came begging to her own son. The statement showed the name of an escort club, Romeo, followed by high-end restaurants and bars. She was spending over $40,000 a month. After a good laugh, I took a sip of cold water to cool down my head, and then continued speaking. Even when you're nearly 70 years old, how could you pick a young, handsome guy at an escort club and take him around to all the high-end restaurants? I don't know how she got that way. And how did she end up begging for money at her own son's house? I'm really curious if she ended up addicted or something like that. I scratched at the wound and pried. My mother-in-law unexpectedly spoke. He told me he feels love for the princess who gives him an allowance. He even gives me presents. This made me blow out the water I had been drinking for the purpose of cooling my head. I end up giggling and laughing. The water had gone to waste. Referring to a 67-year-old as a princess is quite something, isn't it? Well, by uttering words, some people fall for it, like my mother-in-law, becoming like a man's personal ATM, so they'll keep saying those words, won't they? However, I took another sip of water. If you're giving an escort guy an allowance, you must be withdrawing a considerable amount, right? It wasn't my mother-in-law who visibly shuddered.
Huh?
The voice that uttered this was indeed my husband's. I placed a piece of paper on the table. It was fun meeting you today. I love you. Please request me again. Read the business card with a handwritten message.
Huh?
My husband stared at the business card on the table. I didn't expect to be kicked out of the house all of a sudden. I didn't even tidy up my own room, did I? I found your stuff while I was cleaning up your things. Even the strange money deductions. It all makes sense now. Yes, that's right, so it's not just my fault. My mother-in-law shouted in a hoarse voice. There was a glass of lemonade in front of her, but she hadn't touched it at all. It might be expected since she had been continuously blamed. However, as the target of blame shifted, she attempted an unexpected turnaround.
What?
My husband's voice trembles as he reacts to this blow. But because I've been laughed at this much, am I the only one being ridiculous? Isn't that so unfair?
Huh? No, just wait a minute. You're making me spend this much money and now you're saying this?
That's my line. Asking for money because your allowance isn't enough? I can't believe you're into escort girls too. Like parent, like child. Must be an annoying way to spend money. It's over now, isn't it? Both of you are done, right?
Ugh.
At my words, both my husband and mother-in-law had no words left. Enough is enough. I called the children on the second floor. Come down for a minute. The two children came down. We're parting ways because your dad and grandma have been spending too much money on themselves until now, I said. Your dad has been spending a lot of money on another woman, and your grandma has been spending a lot of money on a younger man. They want even more, I explained candidly.
Hold on, don't say that in front of the kids.
My husband tried to intervene, but...
No, if we're using money like that, Mom will have no choice but to say something. Oh, I don't like you, Dad, trying to hide things.
The older child continued.
I mean, giving money to other people and then saying there's no money for my toys? Don't mess around. I might be okay without toys, but my big brother probably has tutoring fees to pay.
The younger one said. That's right. You see, I want to use the money for your future. Now say goodbye to people who spend their money on strangers. Upon hearing my words, my older child said,
It's goodbye for us too.
My younger child said,
I'll learn to do without toys. It's despicable that he spent money on something other than you, Mom.
In the end, it was only natural, but I cut ties with both my husband and my mother-in-law. I got a large amount of alimony because of the divorce due to my husband and mother-in-law's spending. On the other hand, my husband and mother-in-law, who had once indulged in frivolous spending, were a regrettable case, and I could anticipate the consequences. They continued to indulge until they hit rock bottom. As a result, it seems they accumulated debts to the extent that they had to let go of the house. Even though they have to pay both alimony and child support, what on earth are they doing? Of course, I have no intention of making concessions. I expect them to pay in full. I continued to work part-time after that. We couldn't afford many luxuries, but somehow the three of us managed to lead a decent life. It's modest, but I want to do what I can for the children. I hope to continue living harmoniously with the three of us in the future. My husband had brought up the idea and I was genuinely enjoying a solo shopping trip for the first time in a while. Unexpectedly, I bumped into my in-laws, who then decided to drop by our house. They don't live close, so they were thrilled about the chance to see our daughter. On our way home, we excitedly shared photos of her. When I got back home sooner than anticipated, only my daughter was there. "I'm home." "Hold on, where's—" I had expected my husband to be home too, but he was nowhere to be found. Mandy was clueless about his whereabouts. Seriously? He left her by herself? This didn't add up. Nervous, I quickly called him. Shockingly, he flat out lied to me.
Right now, I'm at my parents' house with our daughter.
In that split second, I decided. I was about to show my dishonest husband what trouble really looked like. My name's Rachel, 34 years old. In college, I majored in architecture, and now I'm employed at an architecture firm. Having a top-tier architect license means I earn a bit more than many others. This has led to a consistent increase in my annual income, likely surpassing many people around the same age. While I truly adore my profession, there's another motivator: my beloved family. At the moment, I live with my husband, Scott, and our daughter, Mandy. I met Scott 7 years ago, became pregnant shortly after our wedding 5 years ago, and welcomed our daughter the next year. Mandy's 4th birthday is just around the corner. Thankfully, she's been growing up healthy without any serious issues. With both Scott and me working full-time, Mandy attends daycare. From what her teacher mentions, she's befriended many kids and seems to be doing great socially. I go the extra mile in my job for the sake of my wonderful daughter and husband. On the other hand, Scott's job is at a manufacturing plant. However, I've caught wind that the plant's sales have taken a downturn. Just recently, he commented over a beer.
If things continue this way, they might cut me to save on labor.
I was so taken aback that I choked on my coffee. Concealing my alarm, I asked, "What do you mean? Can they just lay you off out of the blue?"
Rumors have been swirling for some time, and they've actually started letting some folks go.
Now that you mention it, I guess your paychecks have been lighter lately, huh?
I'm actually thinking of picking up a part-time night job. So we should be good with bills.
Hold on. A night job?
Yeah, I've put in an application, and there's an interview lined up.
My heart sank hearing this. He's already stretched thin. Adding nighttime work seems excessive. After a pause, I voiced, "You really don't need that night job."
But with what I'm making now...
My company is on the upswing, and our profits are climbing. Financially, we're solid.
You sure?
Absolutely. I'd hate for you to burn out.
Rachel. Okay, I'll lean on you for this one.
We settled on him sticking with the plant job for the foreseeable future. I've kept it from him, but in reality, we could live comfortably on just my earnings. Bringing that up might hurt his ego. My last intention is to upset him. I only wish for him to have a stress-free job. Since our talk, he doesn't seem as downcast. In fact, he appears more upbeat. His frequent smiles warm my heart. It looks like he's less burdened about his job. That's a relief. With my steady income rise, financial concerns are off our plate. Above all, the happiness of our family is paramount. With that mindset, I've been grinding away. Yet, back then, I had no inkling that my leniency regarding his job would later come back to bite. Fast forward a month. After wrapping up at work, I picked up Mandy from daycare like always and headed home. Usually, Scott will be back by the time I start dinner. But he was notably late that day. Over dinner, Mandy wandered aloud.
Mom, why is Dad taking so long?
I don't know, I answered, glancing at my phone. No texts from him. Post-dinner, I tried to call him, but all I got was the endless tone of an unanswered call. This was a first for us, so I couldn't help but fear the worst. He didn't have an accident, did he? But if something like that happened, surely someone would have reached out. Everything has to be all right. After tucking my daughter in, I chose to wait up for him. Around 11 p.m., I finally heard the front door. Racing to greet him, he looked taken aback.
You're still up?
His nonchalance irked me, prompting me to voice my frustration. What do you mean, still up? Do you realize how late it is? You ignored all my texts. Do you have any idea how worried I was?
Oh, my bad. I got roped into some unexpected overtime and didn't check my phone.
Overtime? Would a quick text have been too much to ask? Just to let me know you'd be late?
That's why I'm saying sorry. I promise I'll be more considerate next time. All right?
Seriously? After all my worrying? I'm going to bed. I sighed, turned, and made my way to the bedroom. Instead of a genuine apology, all I heard was a heavy sigh behind me. Come morning, though I tried to keep things normal for Mandy, he was visibly grouchy.
Daddy? You got in late last night. You okay?
She attempted to chat him up a few times, but he ignored her.
Daddy, are you listening? Hey, Daddy! Mom and I were really worried about you. Can you not hear my voice anymore?
Watching her verge on tears from his cold shoulder, I had to bite back my anger and comforted her. Oh, sweetie, I'm sorry. Daddy had a late work night and he's just exhausted.
Was he at work?
Yes, he was working hard for both of us. We'll chat with him later, okay?
All right. Sorry, Daddy, and thanks for always working so hard.
She shot him a heartfelt smile, but he remained stone-faced. No matter how hard she tried, he was short with her. His childlike sulking was puzzling more than infuriating. I resolved to have him reconnect with her that evening. But starting from that day, his routine shifted to consistently coming home past midnight. Sure, he'd informed me of his late hours, but overtime was a rarity for him before. It felt off. Choosing to get to the bottom of it, I hired a private investigator to shadow him on weekdays for a couple of weeks. Mid-investigation, one day, I arrived home to Scott already there. I didn't expect you home this early. He grinned and said,
Every now and then, it's good to prioritize family. It was a slow day at work, so I took off early.
Really? Dinner will be ready soon. Just hang tight.
Got it. I'll hang out with Mandy in the meantime.
Huh? Oh, sure. Thanks. His sudden change in attitude was disconcerting. As I started cooking, Scott, playing with Mandy, called over.
Hey, Rachel. How about you take next Saturday off for yourself?
All alone?
You deserve a breather too. You've shouldered all the household responsibilities. I'll manage Mandy for the day.
Are you sure?
Absolutely. It's the least I can do.
He smiled warmly. Despite our recent tension, perhaps he was trying to be thoughtful. Maybe this was his way of extending an olive branch. My resentment began to diminish. Though it might seem minor, this gesture touched me. So I accepted his offer and planned a solo shopping day. That weekend, I dressed up, did my makeup, and ventured downtown on my own. I started off early, explored a few art galleries I'd had on my list, treated myself to a fancier than usual lunch, and wrapped up my afternoon browsing through a high-end department store sporting my favorite labels. It was only 3 p.m., and even though Scott told me to enjoy my day and not rush back until evening, I'd already hit all the stores on my list and bagged my buys. I went to a supermarket to grab some ready-to-eat dishes and a dessert for dinner. It seemed a little early, but the idea of having an early dinner together appealed to me. As I was scanning the aisles, a voice rang out.
Rachel!
Followed by a tap on my shoulder. Startled, I turned to see Mary, my mother-in-law. Mary, what brings you here?
You're by yourself today?
Yeah, just me. Scott's on daddy duty with Mandy, so I'm enjoying a rare day out.
Oh, really? Jason's around too. How about we catch up over some tea?
Sounds perfect. She flagged down Jason, my father-in-law, and we settled in a cafe near the supermarket. They actually live out in the sticks, quite a haul from the city. Turns out, they'd driven into town for a concert featuring Mary's favorite singer. It had been a hot minute since we last caught up, so our conversation flowed easily. At some point, Jason remarked,
I've been missing Mandy so much.
Picking up on that cue, I proposed. Hey Mary, Jason, how about swinging by our place today?
Now? You sure?
Totally. Scott's around and I've got tomorrow off since it's Sunday. If you guys are up for it.
That sounds wonderful. We've really been missing time with Mandy.
She'll be over the moon to see you two. Please, do come over. We then prepped to head out a tad early, and they even pitched in, picking up a bunch of dishes and desserts. On the train ride home, we gushed over recent snaps of Mandy, and soon enough, we were back. But something was off. only Mandy was home. I'm home. Hold on. Where's... I had expected Scott to be home too, but he was nowhere to be found. Mandy was clueless about his whereabouts. Seriously? He left her by herself? This didn't add up. What's he up to? Mary whispered, a touch of worry in her voice. I didn't waste a second and called Scott. When he answered with a breezy, "Hello?" I switched to speaker mode so Mary and Jason could listen in. Trying to keep my composure, I asked, "Where are you right now?"
Now, I'm at my folks' house with Mandy.
Your folks?
Yup. Thought you were gonna be out late, so I figured I'd let them hang with Mandy. It's been a while.
I shot a glance toward Mary and Jason, who were clearly thrown off. I mean, anyone would get that this story didn't add up. Right then, it hit me. Scott was betraying me, our family, and he was going to pay for it. After hanging up, I left Mandy with Mary and Jason and made a beeline to the PI agency I'd hired earlier. I laid out the whole story and they handed over their findings. Just as I'd feared, Scott was seeing someone else. All his working late stories, all made up. Even worse, he'd lost his job and was blowing through his severance on daytime rendezvous. No doubt he's with her right this moment. As soon as his affair was confirmed, all my love for him evaporated. It wasn't long before I was dead set on a divorce. This was all so out of the blue. I'd sensed something was off, but cheating? And to think he left our little girl all alone at home for this fling? Unthinkable. Once I got home, I told everything to Mary and Jason. Both my in-laws and I were taken aback, and yeah, we were mad. Hours went by as we sat there, waiting for Scott to waltz through the door, with my in-laws right there with me for support. I rang up my sister, who lives just around the corner, to come get Mandy and watch her for the night. Then, a little after 7 p.m., in walked Scott.
I'm back.
He strolled into the living room like it was any other day, but the three of us stared him down hard.
What the?
He went from casual to ghost white in a split second. Caught red-handed, he scrambled for an explanation.
Look, Rachel, this isn't what it looks like. I was just shopping.
Shopping? Didn't you say you were with your folks? Funny thing, I bumped into them at the supermarket and rode home with them.
Well, actually...
And let's not forget how you left Mandy, our little girl, all alone. Also, you could sneak around with your mistress? My voice rising, I threw down the photos I'd gotten from the PI. He went mute, face drained of all color. With a stern voice, I snapped. Using your own parents as your alibi? Abandoning Mandy to be with her? You're lower than low.
Please, I swear it won't happen again. Just give me another chance.
Another chance? Buddy, you were done the minute you pulled this stunt. There's no coming back from this. And trust me, you'll pay for what you've done. As I laid into him, my in-laws took charge, grabbing him by the arm and hustling him out. He tried to yell something, but they weren't having it, and carted him off to their place. Later, I lawyered up, filed for divorce, and went after him for alimony. With the proof I had, and my in-laws backing me up, the divorce wrapped up quick. He coughed up alimony, and now pays child support monthly. And with my in-laws keeping tabs, I doubt he'll miss a payment. from what Mary's told me, he's now bouncing between odd jobs and trying to land steady work. Frankly, I hope he's got it tough with them watching his every move. As for me and Mandy, we started fresh. I kept it simple when I told her we'd be on our own from now on, and she got it. She didn't need a lot of words. Even for her age, she's wise beyond her years. It stings, knowing she's had to deal with all this, but I'm just so thankful. She's rolled with the punches. Our new normal might come with its own set of challenges, but I'm determined to stay strong with Mandy by my side and never second guess my choice.